Everyone. Today I thought it might be interesting to look at a reading where we talk a little bit about how the meanings of the cards will change a little bit based on the context. And they will vary a little bit. When we start out, we spend a lot of time learning what the cards mean. But once we learn what the cards mean, we discover very quickly that we encounter situations where someone will ask, "What's the best thing in my life right now?" And the Ten of Swords comes up. And you have to rethink your answer based on the fact that we're talking about a traditionally negative card in terms of the best thing that's going on. So I thought it might be fun to do a set of three really quick readings, using the same three cards for the same person at different points or with different questions. So we're going to use Atticus Finch, or the characters from To Kill a Mockingbird, and we're going to let Atticus Finch ask two questions, and then Scout Finch is going to ask another question. And I should probably say at this point that if you've never read or seen To Kill a Mockingbird, there's some spoiler alerts in here. So I did draw these cards randomly. They didn't. I didn't pick them. I didn't stack the deck, as they say. So these are the three cards that came up for this reading. And in its way, you can't really get a grimmer set. It's pretty unhappy. We move from terror to heartbreak, and it's pretty sad. But I think it's interesting that they came up. It's also a very cerebral reading because the swords are the mind, of course, and Atticus has always felt very cerebral to me. I have my notes here. I'm drawing back the curtain a little bit there, too. It's impossible to read my handwriting, even for me. Although I heard recently that they've stopped teaching cursive in schools, which I feel like is sort of a crime, but that's a digression. So, three readings using the same cards. In the first reading, Atticus is asking this question. I'm about to face the hardest trial of my professional life, and it's also a trial for my family. What can I do to protect them, and what can I do to succeed? And so we get these three cards. And so, let me move this down a little bit so I can see it. In the first card, the Nine of Swords reversed, for this first question, I think that this speaks to the opposite of the way I normally interpret this card, which is that the fears are all in the mind. This card says to me right here that Atticus wants to accept that his fears are based in something, that they're real, and that there are real dangers that he's facing right now and that his family's facing right now, and that there could be physical effects from those dangers. They're not entirely mental. He has reason to be afraid, and being aware of that and accepting that and being alert as a result of it is a really good way to protect his family. In the Four of Swords reversed, I think alertness comes into play here as well. I think that this says that this is going to be hard work. Succeeding in this is going to be hard work. Protecting his family is going to be hard work. And that matters. This is not the time to rest. He's going to have to call up on all his wit and muster all his intelligence and really push through that. This is not a time to rest. It's not a time to let down your guard. Then finally we get to the Three of Swords, and in this case, I think that this card suggests that another thing that he can do to protect his family is to use this as an opportunity to help them realize that, as the Buddhists say, suffering is. This is a teaching experience. It's an opportunity to learn, and again, we're dealing with swords, and so we're dealing with the mind, and I think that's relevant in this particular case. That this is an opportunity to teach his family that suffering is, that heartbreak exists. And I always think of this particularly with the Three of Swords, because the three ties into wisdom on the Tree of Life, and the swords are about the mind, that this is also an opportunity to demonstrate to his family that though things can be sad, though suffering exists, that we learn from it, we grow, and we discover new things. So just to quickly summarize before moving on to the next reading, the fear is real, it's not baseless, there's something to be afraid of, you've got to be alert, your fears are justified, and being aware of that can help you protect your family. Being alert also comes into play here, and that it's time to work hard, it's time to muster all your mental agility, it's time to be certain that you never let down your guard. And there's a learning experience at work here, and suffering exists, and this is an opportunity to teach his family that. So that's the first reading. Now, in the second reading, Atticus is post-trial here, and he's saying, I've just lost the most important case of my life, and my client and my kids are upset about it. How can we all move on? So same cards, different question, different time. The Nine of Swords here, I think, suggests that now we know the results of what we were afraid of. This was an anxiety-riddled situation, we've moved through it, and the unknown is known now. So in that way, our brains can relax. The question mark has disappeared. We now know what we were afraid of. We know what we didn't know before. But even though the unknown is known, it's not time to stop fighting. This isn't the end. It's barely the midpoint, being a 4 in the Suit of Swords. And it's time to synthesize what you learned now that you know this, and help it to move you to the next part of the fight. The Three of Swords here, I think, suggests that Atticus' question was about how do we move on, and I think the Three of Swords suggests here that there's pain in the world, which in that way ties into the first reading. Pain exists, and that it has to be gone through. You can't rush through grief in order to grow and heal. You can't rush to moving on. You really have to go through this experience. So again, these are really baseline readings. Of course, in a real reading for Atticus, we'd probably go a lot deeper just with these 3 cards. But with the Nine of Swords, in the first reading, we were accepting that our fears were, that they had a base, that they were justified, and that we needed to be alert and prepared. In the second reading, it was about accepting that the unknown has been made known. What we were afraid of has now been revealed to us. We can move forward from that. The Four of Swords in both cases indicated work. Again, this is a reversal from the Four of Swords upright. In the first reading, it was about using mental agility, alertness, and skill to really dig deep, not let down your guard. In a similar way, but with a different context, the 4 indicates that, in the second reading, that things aren't over yet. There's still more that can be done. There's still time to fight. And there's still reason to fight. In the Three of Swords, in the first reading, this was a learning experience for the family. We're going to discover that suffering exists in the world. In our sheltered life, we haven't really dealt much with that, but we're going to discover that it's there, and that it matters, and it makes us wiser. In the second reading, this was about going through the suffering. The bad stuff has happened, and we can't rush through our grief. Only through experiencing that grief can we really grow and reach that same wisdom that the 3 is associated with. So some major differences here, very subtle differences here, really just based on the context of what the fight is about. And here really subtle differences in terms of what this means. In the first reading, it was about just knowing that something exists. In the second one is about feeling and going through it. So our third reading, which we're going to conclude with, is actually for Scout. And same time period, she's pre-trial, not post-trial. And she, being a kid, and being a pretty aggressive kid, is asking for a more predictive reading. She asks us this: my father is fighting the most difficult battle of his life. What's going to happen, and what's it going to mean for him? So in this case, I think it matters that we're talking to a child, even though it's a pretty precocious child. And I think it matters that we're being asked a predictive question. In this case, the Nine of Swords says to me that he's going to have to transcend the fears that he's experiencing right now. That he is scared, but he's going to push through those fears. He's going to be nervous, but he's going to do something a lot of people don't do, which is to fight their fears, overcome them, and do what he knows is right, even though it's a terrifying thing to do. In that same vein, he's going to put all that intelligence, all his wits, all his smarts into fighting for this thing and calling on his very powerful brain and his powerful abilities to solve a very difficult problem. Then we get to the Three of Swords again here, and this suggests that it's probably going to feel like a step backwards for him in life. He's going to feel like he didn't succeed. But it's not a reversed card, it's upright, so maybe he did succeed at least in a way. But either way, he's going to feel upset, and it's going to be a difficult time for him. He'll probably need the support of maybe his family, of these three swords sort of creating a unity. But this is a wisdom card, and he's a wise enough man to push through that. He'll probably reach a better place, and he'll probably come out on the other side seeing the world differently, or at least helping other people be able to see the world differently. He's not going to be happy, but he's a smart enough man to understand, to be prepared, and to come through it better. So again, just to sort of quickly compare, for Scout, in this predictive reading, this was not about the first example, the first reading where this was about fears being real, or the second example, which is that the unknown is known. This is about pushing through fear. Atticus is going to push through the fear, and he's going to come through it. Again, this is always about work and fighting for me in this reading. And it's still about mental agility. So again, subtle differences here, but he's going to push through his fears to do this, and he's going to solve a problem. Again, subtle differences here. It's not about our first example, which was about accepting that suffering exists. It's not about the second example, which was about experiencing and allowing yourself to go through it. It was about the wisdom, it was about the unity, it was about the fact that it will be gone through, but it will be come through on the other side. Again, a 3 is early in the process, so there's a lot more to go through. One of Atticus's famous quotes in the book is, "It's not time to worry yet," and it's a real defining line for him. He's going to be upset, but he's going to know there's hope. I don't know why there's always something hopeful about this card. It hurts, but it heals. And it's not a very violent image. Anyway, so those are the 3 versions of the reading based on 3 different questions with the same cards. And again, I think it's a decent example to show the subtle ways that context matters. The 9 of Swords is always about fear. The 4 of Swords is always about rest. And the 3 of Swords is always about sadness. But in each question and in each example, the question and the timing changed the way I approached those basic meanings. In this meeting, this was always about work, but it changed a little bit each time. This was always about sadness, but sometimes it was about accepting it, sometimes it was about feeling it, and sometimes it was about coming through it. So anyway, that's just a quick set of reading based on this idea of how context changes meaning. I'd love to hear what you might have said or done differently, or if you try this yourself, what you come up with for Atticus or Scout or Jeb or anyone else. And if you like the video, please feel free to share it or comment on it or like it. And other than that, I hope you have a great week and enjoy working with this. Thanks.